Okay, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is a regular board meeting, September 28, and we will have a roll call. August 28th. I wish. August.
Anderson.
Here.
Gutman.
Here.
Hauser.
Here.
Kent.
Here.
Mead. Here. Menke.
Here.
Sayer Geiser. Here.
And we'll go ahead and,
Our district mission is to teach all, reach all. Our district vision is that Urbandale will be a school district that brings learning to life for everyone. Our school board mission is to partner with stakeholders to teach all and reach all through governance of board policy and operating protocol.
thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move, Sayer Geiser.
Count. Count will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. And we will open public comments. And so, Jane? Go ahead and give your name and your address.
Sit.
Thank you. Jane Robinette, 4302 131st Circle. I'm an alum of Urbandale Schools, kindergarten through high school. I've lived in Urbandale for many years as an adult. I'm here because I care about this community and was surprised and baffled by the district's actions in response to Senate File 496. After the first banned book list went public, and after many objections, including mine, the district greatly modified those lists, especially those with LGBTQ+ characters or content. I thank you for those changes. I won't repeat most of the points that I made in the email that I sent prior to that decision, but I remain concerned about how the district will act on these laws going forward. The superintendent's letter emphasized the district's extensive analysis of SF 496, but the initial list went well beyond the reach of that law. It seemed as if instead of looking to the words in the bill that passed, the district relied on language found in earlier versions of the bill or laws that passed in other states. I've heard of other area districts telling staff to remove rainbow flags and ally stickers because they would be considered promotion under the law. This overinterpretation is unwarranted and just dangerous. Rainbow flags, ally stickers, and similar items can help create a sense of well-being and safety for many students, staff, and families. They promote community and inclusion. I hope Urbandale will not follow that approach. Significant policy changes like these require analysis, more analysis, input, and oversight than occurred this time. So please support board review and approval of these kind of proposed policy changes before they are implemented. To be clear, I feel for all public school staff and administrators. They have been hit with a lot this year. They've had to figure out on their own what this law means because the State Department of Education has abdicated their responsibility by not providing guidance. Sponsors of the bill can't even agree about the bill. But in the face of that silence, I urge you not to overinterpret the law. I urge you to remember who you serve, and it's not the legislature. When you make policies under this law and future ones, I urge you to center the needs and well-being of students, especially the most vulnerable. Focus on finding creative ways to lawfully support them. The more that schools obey in advance, going beyond what the law requires, the more it will encourage more troubling legislation. So finally, and most of all, I urge the district and its staff and all of you to be brave.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
That's it. So we'll go ahead and have someone motion to bring the consent agenda forward.
Move to open the consent agenda.
Thank you. Will second.
Thank you. So do we have any questions or clarifications? It's quite a list.
I have several.
Okay.
Under, basically for all of the contracts and agreements, there's a lack of information. The first one, for example, yes, I can see that it's recycling bins, but I don't know where. I don't know, there's blanks in the contract. I don't know what we're agreeing to.
So Drop It is a company that we would fill in the date after the board if the board passes.
Okay.
And this is a company that does a customized wrapped type of, I don't wanna call it a dumpster, but it's a bin that will be at the high school. Tim has found a location working with Zach Wheeler, and this will have a QR code that if people want to recycle their recyclables, they'll get the QR code and you walk up and it opens it for you and it goes in, and there's a way, the mechanism counts things, and there's a percentage of the recycling money that goes to the school as a fundraiser. So it's a fundraiser item, and it's only at the high school.
Okay.
And those are being split 50-50 with the high school and activity department.
Where would it be located at the high school?
It's gonna be off to the side of the building where the stadium is, but I couldn't tell you the exact place till I see where they put it.
So the
It has to have
community
power.
can drop off
Mhm.
things?
Yep.
Okay.
And some of the activities will have a QR code that they'll pass out to their fans at games or families in the neighborhood so that they can use that if they choose to recycle that way.
Okay, so does the company have any kind of, once the QR code opens, anything can be thrown in? So if we get
Non-recyclables.
non-recyclables or things like that, does the company deal with that, or does that become our issue?
The company does. Their method of, once they pick it up, their sorting method will account for that. So we don't have to deal with any of it.
Okay. On final forms, again, there's just no information on here other than saying final forms, and let me look at it again.
That is for the athletic department, it's gonna use that for collecting forms, physicals, communication with parents, and kind of keep a roster and a way of communicating with all the players and staff, basically.
Okay, so when I look at the cost of that, there's a one-time building fee that they're waiving, but then the fee covers, it says 900 athletes times $450 a year. So what is the cost or management load currently that we're asking for this to replace?
Right now, it's basically being done by the athletic office itself, so I don't know if there really is a known figure on that. We'd have to have them kind of put that to the pen and pencil to figure that out, maybe.
This automates the process.
This automates it, yes.
So it's like an app that I can send to you and say, dear Mrs. Mead, your daughter's physical for volleyball expires in 10 days. And you can communicate back and forth on it. You can upload new documents to it. You can ask questions through it if there's a medical emergency while they're away in Sioux City, for example. All that information is in the app, and
It'll have emergency contacts and everything within that app for them the coaches to have on
coaches would have
site.
that.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, they determined, Josh Fry determined this will save them lots of man hours
okay,
once they get everything loaded in. And it is also, works with Power School also. So there's some ways of moving data in between the two systems.
okay. And it will be protected since now we're putting vital information, it's protected
It's out on the
Through-
cloud, yeah.
through their
Through their-
organization,
yep.
it's protected and guarded, or is that
Yep,
protected
through
through
there,
our?
through them.
Okay. On the Gallagher contract, I can see that it's insurance review consultation. I can see that it's $185 an hour, but it doesn't really give me any indication of how many hours we think we'll need from them or what that looks like.
Yes, I had Gallagher give me some information on that. I'll just kind of give you the years and how many hours they've billed us for. In 2022, they billed us for 123.25 hours. In 21, they billed us for 250 hours. In 2020, it was 217.8. And 2019, 152.9. Do you want me to go further, or is that enough?
Nope, this is something that
They manage our insurance fund, basically. They work with Wellmark on making sure we have enough money in the insurance fund to cover all of our costs and premiums and everything.
okay. Okay,
They're kind of a third party.
And they answer questions like,
Oh, yeah,
we
they,
had recently, an employee had a question on a prescription availability. So
Okay.
it's kind of like an attorney that would bill you for whatever hours. So we consulted with them on getting that information so we could provide that to the employee.
and they're like that middleman between the
Yep.
insurance and the
Yep.
district of taking care of those
yeah, and they
type of
help
questions?
negotiate our rate increase each year too.
Okay. Did that.
I don't necessarily wanna hold this contract up, but in the future on these, especially when it relates to billable hours, can we put a clause in there that says up to X number of hours and then hours
I-
beyond that
I
needs board
think this
approval?
one says 250 on it, but I'll verify that. We'll make sure that has it on there.
Okay. And then on the last one, from what I can see, it looks like there's, the plus 2,500 looked different from last year, because it says the current investment, and it had that 8,700, and then in the new contract, it had the plus, and I didn't know if that was different from last year, or what the reasoning was for that $12.50 an hour plus 2,500. It takes our total up to kind of that 2,500 more compared to we're up at the top, it says current investment. So I just wanted some clarification on those numbers, or what, if you could tell me more about this.
Lauren,
Say
would that
hi.
be when you could come up and give a little bit on, I'm sorry, it's easier to hear on the mic if you come up.
Lauren McGregor, Director of HR and Operations. I believe that's our wellness consultant fees where we get additional support from EFR and we get some trainings and webinars along with just overall support from them on the activities that we do throughout the year.
Okay, is that, am I reading this contract when I look at it correctly? To me, current investment looks like what we paid this year, and then next year's looks like more. So is that
Yeah, so the-
2,500 additional from last year or different from last year?
No,
or-
but what we did is that in order to get on the, and I think that's what's being reflected here, on the same rotation with the fiscal year, we went 12 months and then 10 months. So we'll have a renewal now on June 30th for July 1 next year instead of the September 1.
Okay. Okay,
We did that, we locked in the rate last year for 2 years.
okay,
But we had to pay, and we've already done that, we paid each year separately.
okay. Okay, thank you.
I'm just looking for reassurance. Someone on the personnel report came by in a previous meeting and proposed a lot of really good programs that I think we're all very excited for. Now that they're leaving, I want to just double check that all of those programs are still going to be a go. Okay.
Our FFOs work very well together and those programs aren't affected by one
Yeah,
meeting or.
I talked to Jolie on that and she said that the FFOs will.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure
Running
since
it.
we just voted on all those amazing things last time.
Yeah, and she's doing one meeting with parents tonight, I think from 4 to 4:30, so.
Okay, let's do a roll call to approve.
Anderson,
Yes.
Gutman,
Yes.
Mauser,
Yes.
Kent,
Yes.
Mead,
Yes,
Mankey,
Yes.
Sayer Geiser. Yes. So carry 7-0.
So we'll move into the superintendent's report.
Yeah, just a short report. In front of you, you have the 22-23 Urbandale Activities End of the Year report. They put this together and shared it with me electronically. They also printed it because it comes out a little bit better when it's printed than if you see it in a PDF. But I would encourage you to take a look at that. There's a lot of really good information in there, from their records to some information about fundraising and awards that our kids have won. Some you might remember through the board recognition program. I also, in front of you, you have the snack boxes. These are something that we've started when I came here, and the annual tradition of giving out to all staff at the beginning of the year. Of course, we're limited on an amount that we're allowed to put in them, but I want to thank Jesse Sadler and the Nutrition Services Department for organizing this and putting it together. So we wanted you guys to also have one. So I hope you enjoy the snacks, and That's really all I have for tonight.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Jesse, if you're listening. Okay, so we'll move then into the action items that were brought forward on August 14. So the first item is the middle school esports programming.
Can I move to approve?
Please,
I move to approve.
Kent will second that.
thank you. We need a roll call? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. That appears to be unanimous. We also discussed at the last meeting the level 1 investigators for this school year in each building. So may I have a motion?
Kent will move to approve.
Anderson, second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, no. Appears to be unanimous. And we will move into the second readings and approvals for a number of policies. Sorry to those of you who are watching and listening.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Sorry.
So we'll move into, pardon me, policy 210, which is a notice of meeting agenda.
There was no feedback on this one.
Do you want these approved each? Okay,
Individually.
Sarah Geiser, move to approve policy 210.
Mead will second.
thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. So unanimous. We will move into 215, which is the board meeting agenda.
And there were two pieces of feedback, one that was received after the last meeting, and then there's an additional policy feedback that was received after the board agenda was published. That one was a question on whether the last paragraph needed to be added because it was copy and pasted from 217. That last paragraph is recommended by our legal counsel just to maintain decorum of meetings, so we didn't feel that that was a problem to repeat that paragraph.
Can I suggest a change for when it refers to the citizens petition? So that was House File 868, and the language of that bill says the last regularly scheduled school board election to make a distinction between a special election and the regular. So the law as written just has that extra language in it.
Who voted in the last regular school election?
Yes.
That was clarified by our legal counsel, so if the board wishes to add that.
Dan, which paragraph are you looking at?
This one right here, where it talks about they needed 500 signatures or 10% of
Gotcha,
the
thank
last.
you.
I'd like to make a motion to add that, the language Dan just sent to that paragraph to clarify it for everyone.
And approve?
And approve, sorry, yes.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Unanimous, thank you. The, let's see, 217, public participation in board meetings.
There was just the one piece, this commenter disagrees with the additional language and felt if something was going on in the community that warrants a special board meeting, the public should have the right to share their opinion with the board, and they can email, but there are times they felt public comment was needed.
So it does say that public comment shall be limited to regular board meetings and will not be routinely held during special board meetings. So I think the fact that it says routinely indicates that we as a board could decide that we could have public comment on those special board meetings. That's how I interpret it.
I guess I feel if we're meeting in a public meeting, whether it's special or regularly scheduled, that I would like for the public to be able to have the ability to comment.
Yeah. There's nothing routine about a special board meeting in my mind.
And that's not what it says.
That's not-
No, but it says it will not be routinely held during special board meetings. A special board meetings are not routine for us, and I think there are circumstances that public comment would be, we would do better to err on the side of transparency and accessibility rather than not.
And I think a work session is considered a special meeting, isn't it, under the language? So that's where that comes from. I don't think it necessarily means we're having a meeting Wednesday night for some special reason.
So then could you say regular or work session meeting? I think what we're saying is that if it is a Wednesday, that we wouldn't, because otherwise then we could still, in the policy, it would still be limited to the 3 minutes and only for 45 minutes. But if it is for both of those Monday meetings that we have, then it would open it up to the public for comments.
So are you saying, and will not routinely, public comment shall be limited to regular board meetings and will not be routinely held during work session?
I don't think we say not routinely held. I just think if the intent is that on our meeting dates that any public comment could be made, that those are our routine meeting dates. They typically happen twice a month, so maybe it's public comment shall be limited, or public comment shall be really at any regular scheduled board meeting or work session. I mean, so any of our scheduled meetings that are on our web page, that are on our, not one that pops up that's gonna happen in 3 days or something like that.
Can I ask, where did this change come from? What's the source of why this change came about?
I believe we're changing the title, first of all, from public comment to public participation. And I believe this was an IASB, correct me?
And do we have any basis for their recommendation on that?
I believe that they were originally, back when they were in session with the legislature, they were talking about having 30 minutes of public comment at the beginning of every board meeting. That was something that they were proposing in one of the laws that they were writing. That didn't pass, so I assume that IASB has put this in its place. That's an assumption. I don't know exactly why that was proposed.
Okay, so currently though, we only have public comment once a month, right?
When the board is taking action.
Right, yeah. So this is keeping with that, but then in my interpretation says that we could decide to ask public comment on any other meeting that we so desire.
But I don't know how we do that since
Right.
people have to email us before we would ever make that decision. Because we'd have to meet for a board meeting to make the vote to allow them to public comment on that. So I think that just,
I think either it would have to be a policy change that we say at any of our Monday meetings or our regular board meeting or work session meeting, or not have that routinely
Right.
put in there, because then, yeah, I feel the same. It's gonna take, how do you
Or-
decide whether it's,
But are you saying you don't want routinely there or regular? We'll be limited to our regularly scheduled board meetings? Because we don't want to close, like, I mean, if we just take a couple years back to the special board meetings that were held for like mask mandates and things, those were special board meetings that the public was allowed to comment on. It was not, there was a time limit, but everybody got a comment. So I think we don't want to take that piece out too. We don't want to say that you can't comment at those specially held board meetings.
I would leave that language in so that we can decide as a board to
Right.
allow people to comment. but then add the language around work session. I feel like it would be helpful to have public comments during those work sessions so that we can propose any changes we might see and then maintain the calendar to approve board policy instead of waiting to get those public comments until the night that we're supposed to vote.
Right, and I don't recall a work session where we did not take action because there were bills that needed to be paid or, I mean, every work session is a working meeting, right? So I think, yeah, we've got to, I think, erring on the side of accessibility and basically saying any scheduled meeting.
Does special board meetings cover closed sessions? Like, cause when they
Closed
come up-
sessions would be exempt.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure. So like, I'm trying to decide whether that would be considered the routinely held special, not to be routinely held during special board meetings, if that would cover. Because if we don't need that language, that's my question.
Right, I'm kind of with you there, because we always open when we have like a special board meeting
Yeah.
for a closed session. So if we don't, I don't have a problem with the routinely held during special meetings, because I think that opens that piece up. I think what we're talking about is the regular piece of the description, right?
Well, I'm wondering if you just take out the second phrase and the third phrase. I mean, if you just say, the board encourages public attendance and participation in its public board meetings. Right, then you're not specifying that it's a regular, or specifying that it's work.
So it'd just be simplifying, so we'd have public comment every Monday while we hang out, and then if we have weird ones
I
pop
mean,
up.
if that's what is the intent of this, is that you're wanting to make sure that public comment can be made at any scheduled board meeting.
I would
So-
support that if you
I
need
would
one.
support that.
So what's then you need to make a motion to amend this policy, specific language.
I make a motion to amend this policy to now read, public comment shall be limited to regular board meetings and work sessions and will not be routinely held during special board meetings. Does that fit everybody?
I think you're gonna have to amend the second,
Okay,
because it says public comments will only be heard
On that paragraph.
where am I?
in the paragraph above.
Okay.
Or if it just says, if we just cross off the word regular and just say heard at board
Okay.
meetings.
Yes.
So my original motion, plus we are deleting the regular in the second paragraph, so it just says will only be heard at board meetings. Oh, we could change regular to public and it would fit with the first paragraph.
Mhm.
Sorry, that's unclear. Restate my motion. I move to edit and approve this document, so the second paragraph reads, public comments will only be heard at public board meetings. And the third paragraph reads, public comment shall be limited to regular board meetings and work sessions and will not be routinely held during special board meetings.
Could I ask that you separate your motion from approval?
Okay,
Okay,
so,
you got that?
Okay.
Separating the motion from the approval?
Because I have
We're-
another question
we're
that's
gonna-
not
we're gonna
related
separate.
to
So-
this particular.
okay, so can I make a move to edit this document so then we can have further questions of changing it without approving it? That's what he's asking. He wants to approve the change and then ask further questions after said change.
I will make a motion to table this policy and work as a board to provide clear language and offer it at the next meeting.
Would that fall into the two then meetings that we
Would
have
that
to
go
have?
into two, if we're, or do we, would it go back to first reading?
And so if we
Just
table this
start over.
policy, then we would do a first reading
Uh-huh.
at the next meeting.
Yep.
And then the following meeting, so that the second meeting in September, we would go ahead and do the second reading. and
I think in
approval.
the interest again of transparency, let's make sure that people understand what our changes are so that they can weigh in on what our new policy is rather than trying to piecemeal it.
So what do we come back with? Or,
I heard a motion to table this policy,
right,
I did not hear a second,
I'll second.
okay?
okay?
So I have Maggie motioned.
You want this a roll call?
Let's go ahead and do a roll call. So the motion to table this policy, Gutman,
Yes.
Hauser,
Yes.
Kent,
Yes.
Mead,
Yes.
Mankey,
Yes.
Sayer Geiser,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. That policy is tabled.
So I don't have to do anything? You don't want me to do any, okay.
I would be happy to provide a proposed changes in the comments on the policy section on Simply, and then let everyone react to those.
Travel reimbursement, 420.
Can I, before you, if you talk about this one, that red RR, I don't know where it came from, it's just a typo.
Yeah.
That's why it's coming out.
Were we gonna go over 234?
We'll come back to
These
that
are in
one later.
order.
Gotcha.
Okay. Because that's new.
May I have a motion?
Mankey will move to approve.
Anderson will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay. Policy 421, required professional development.
Sayer Geiser moved to approve 421.
There
So-
was one, I'm sorry, Dan, there was one, I'm just trying to keep up. Question on the feedback for the public. This caused me to stop and think, are staff members questioning why they must take specific training? If so, I'd be interested to learn more about this and how the refusal fits with the mission of teaching all, reaching all. I do want to point out, no staff has refused to do any training. This is something that it's always been part of our process. This is just making it more formal, but this is not because somebody refused to do a training.
My only question about this is, and so it talks about that we're gonna provide professional development, and I'm talking about the last paragraph that's highlighted in green here, around rules adopted by the State Board of Education, educational examiners. Are there any other policies around staff development? I was a little taken aback at our last board meeting when of all of the staff development opportunities presented to our staff and knowing that our mission is to teach all and reach all, and that equity has been something we've struggled with as a district. Do we have any other policies, or would this policy be a place to add in requirements around professional development to ensure that part of our mission? So that we are properly training our staff to best support students and families from marginalized communities. And I could be way off here on as to where this should be in, but I feel like I'd like to codify that, given that that's, we've spoken about that being an emphasis for us in our recent struggles around that.
Well, anything in the 400 series is for employees, so it would not fit here. But if you want me to go and,
Well, this would be professional development for employees on how to best support our marginalized students.
I suppose I would be looking for the board's direction. I don't, off the top of my head, can't tell you. I don't know, Brandon, I don't wanna put you on the spot. Do you, there's none in the 600 or 500 series that you can remember?
And the only reason I say that is that, I really do believe that all of us here at this table are truly concerned with supporting all of our students the best way possible. And, we have a lot of things around equity, and we've got some catchphrases like teach all, reach all, but I'm just not seeing the rubber hit the road. And in talking with students and families from marginalized communities, they do feel disconnected from this district. Generally do not feel that they're as supported as they could. And so I don't know if I have the support of enough board members, but I feel like I would like to codify in some way, whether it be through this policy or through another venue, to really put some teeth behind the words that we speak around equity, and to require that we have some staff development around that.
in reading this, it seems like this is staff development around laws.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if it's just not in this policy. I mean, I hear where you're coming from, but I don't feel like that this particular policy maybe is where that fits. I guess this to me talks more about compliance for Iowa laws and, but I don't, again, maybe Brandon has more information around that.
Yeah, so there is a policy 603, multicultural gender fair program. And staff development activities shall include methods of instruction on multicultural gender fair basis is the current language of that policy. It is under review this year, so we'll be bringing that, I believe in.
February, March-ish.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would perhaps be a better place to put that.
So, do I have a motion?
I think I
Did you?
moved, but I don't know if anyone said.
Mead will second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, go to 609, which is health education.
We did receive feedback on that after the agenda posted. This individual commenter said that they have concerns with the removal of domestic abuse from the topics that will be taught. Far too many young people get into relationships that will sadly involve domestic abuse, and this should still be included. I was also under the impression that while the state now no longer requires districts to discuss HIV, AIDS, HPV, and the HPV vaccine, that it is still up to the district to decide if it will. I worry that by taking it out specifically from this policy, that eventually it will lapse as something that is taught. I would much prefer to see this policy list the HIV, AIDS, HPV, and HPV vaccines specifically, so they will continue to be included in the curriculum going forward. And I believe Brandon is prepared to address this particular piece.
Yeah, so the domestic violence was replaced with interpersonal relationships. And then the prioritized standards that were approved last May after the health curriculum review, there are standards directly addressing violence, both in relationships, but also just ways to prevent violence in situations. And then the HPV, HIV portion was and is present through the prevention and control of disease and communicable diseases. I think the guidance that we received from IASB was really just reflecting the fact that no longer is it required at that certain grade level. But again, the standards that were prioritized and then brought to the board for approval did include those pieces. I believe that specifically begins in the content around 7th grade for that specifically.
So it does show that interpersonal relationships was already in there, and they had domestic abuse separate to make sure that it was continued to be covered. So I'm wondering why we've just lumped it together versus leaving it alone.
Yeah, I think, it was just in clarity in the language of just interpersonal relationships that we need to be addressing that from the state level when we report. We no longer report out domestic violence when we verify the health curriculum.
I have concerns. We also had including, and it said of acquired immune deficiency syndrome, so we did have AIDS listed specifically. I do worry that by removing these, yes, right now our curriculum still includes them, but that doesn't mean to say that they will continue to include them if we get rid of this language. I mean, as soon as, it could change next year. I mean, we want to keep with the curriculum we approve, but I mean, it could very easily be changed. So I'm curious if there is support of the board to put that language back in.
So if you, as a board, approve the curriculum, that would stay until the next iteration of the curriculum. So it's really the board's venue to make that.
But if it's in the policy, then it would have to be included within the curriculum the next time the curriculum comes up.
But when you go look at the curriculum as it comes up, that would be the board to say, this is missing, why is it not there?
But I don't know if they would because it's no longer being mandated. So like, I can't promise that the next time it comes up, someone won't, like, if it's just listed as interpersonal relationships and maybe the curriculum lists it differently, the next time they may not come up and say, why are we not covering domestic abuse? So if it's in the policy, it would at least then have a layer of protection to make sure that it would be referenced back to when looking at curriculum further down the road.
I don't see why it would hurt to keep that in there, to keep domestic violence in there, along with interpersonal relationships.
And I feel the same way about the HIV/AIDS, HPV, and HPV vaccine, because they're no longer being held to a mandatory standpoint at the state level. Doesn't mean we can't hold it to a mandatory point within the school district.
I would look to the board.
Then it would be codified within our policies so that they could reference back to each other, because we can't promise that the next time we go over curriculum, it's gonna be something that someone's thinking about, because there's lots of stuff that we miss.
And I would advocate that that typically happens every 7 years, and that will be probably on that particular board at that time.
Sure.
I would also advocate that the standards, the health standards, and the curriculum study have been pretty specific and laid out quite clearly with community input, if you remember. And so I would contend that I have confidence that we will be able to fulfill those standards with or without the policy. And again, I would contend that, I don't know, 7 years, used to be 7 years, like a
It's
plague
7
of
years and
locusts.
board policy,
And so,
And I agree that curriculum will be on the next board, but this policy is on us right now. So that's why I'm proposing to see if there is enough board support.
well, you would need to make a motion to amend it.
I'm trying to read through where we would include it, so I would make a motion to amend the policy to read, including the effects of alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and poisons on the human body, human sexuality, self-esteem, stress management, interpersonal relationships, domestic abuse, emotional and social health, health resources, prevention and control of diseases, and I can't read that word, diseases, including HIV, AIDS, HPV, and the HPV vaccine, but that's not a communicable disease, but I'm sure there's a way to do it with commas.
I'll second that motion.
You got that, Julie?
You do?
Okay?
So we'll do a roll call vote. Hauser,
No.
just a moment. Kent,
No.
Mead,
No.
Minky,
Yes.
Sayer Geyser,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Gutman.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay. We will move on then to school calendar, 6/28.
And we had one piece of feedback to that. This commenter asked, so does this mean we could potentially have virtual learning for snow days and other emergency cancellations? How would elementary students access this instruction as they do not bring devices home? And also, what if an older student didn't bring the device home? Is there a plan to get emergency internet access to students without ongoing access? So it's kind of two things I would address. And could we have virtual learning for snow days? Yes, we could, but there's also kids being kids and playing and not having to try to get the stress of connecting during a snow day. I think personally, and of course this is the board's, I think when we do the next calendar, we can address it there, but Unless we're having 5, 6, 7, 8 snow days, I think that, I would advocate for kids just being kids. If we were going to go for a snow day that would turn into a learning day based on virtual learning, then I think we would have to have a plan with our elementary schools for getting those devices home. We also have been already looking at our internet access that we provided during COVID, and the 99% of the devices are not being used, and we've contacted the families of those that still had the device to ensure that they still needed it, and so we're covering that base as well, but that really would be, I think, a decision to make on the calendar.
I agree with you, Dr. Decker, that sometimes a snow day is a good unstructured time for a kid to just be a kid. And we don't get that many snow days anymore anyway.
If we can help with shoveling.
Yeah. they can have a shovel.
Well, it could be a heat day too, I mean, wow.
Motion?
Yes, Sarah Geiser moved to approve 628 as written.
Kent will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, we'll move on to 631B, instructional material.
And we have had no feedback on this particular policy.
Kent will move to approve as written.
Minky will second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Unanimous. We'll go to item 9, which is policy 632, school library.
We did receive one piece of feedback on that. This commenter said, I feel that the teacher librarian should be part of this process, and if a large number of current titles are to be removed, this should require at a minimum board knowledge. When large numbers of books are planned to be removed, the board should have a special meeting with appropriate community notice to discuss plans before they are released to staff, students, and other, it says ENT, but I'm assuming that's entities. I think Brandon can comment on the weeding process that we do in our schools, that there's thousands of books that are weeded annually for various reasons. I don't know what specific questions the board might have on this.
So it does state in board policy, I think it's 631 or 630 1A, of the selection of instructional materials and library materials, that is done in conjunction with the building administrator and the teacher librarian, that they work together on that process for the selection. And then the weeding is done with the librarian central to that process. Just in the last 2 years, 39,000, just over 39,000 titles were weeded from our collection system-wide. Last year, it was 12,578 books. They're weeded for a variety of reasons. They can be because they're not circulating, the age of the piece, as well as the condition that they are in. And so there are many reasons that the librarians choose to weed books. And then the fact that we closed and merged 2 libraries together also contributed to some weeding as well, because we have multiple copies of the same text as they worked through that process.
I wonder if the commenter was more concerned about the book issue we had last month, and that comment will be more appropriately addressed when we get to new item action number 7. This seems like more just routine house cleaning, not, banning or quarantining books per se.
I move to approve policy 632.
Kent will second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. That appears to be unanimous. We'll move on to policy 634, which is assessment program.
We received one piece of feedback on this. I think I mentioned at the last meeting, and there are some places that should say parent/guardian that just say parent, and I would offer that should the board pass this, I will change parent to parent/guardian prior to official posting on the website, on the Assembly site.
Anderson moved to approve with those changes.
Minky will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. Unanimous. We'll go to 823, procurement cards.
These are our P cards, which are credit cards for the district, and there was no comment received on this policy.
Need move to approve 823.
Thank you.
Minky will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. And we will move on then to 825, travel reimbursement.
And this one also has received no comments.
Minky moves to approve 825.
Anderson second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. Unanimous. We will move then into 234, second reading of new policies that have been added due to new legislation.
And we received one piece of feedback on this. This commenter said, I feel this is targeted to a recent situation and a specific board member. I don't feel a new board policy should be created to stifle an individual from sharing information with others, especially when it may have an impact on many students in the district. My comment on that is that this has been sitting ready since May, June, when IASB's recommendations came through. This just happens to be the timing. This was not specifically targeting any individual board member.
I would just say if that commenter was referring to me, I'll continue to speak the truth.
A motion would be good.
Need move to approve 234.
Sarah Geiser, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no. And we'll move to policy 549, student disclosure of identity.
And we have two commenters. The first one asked to clarify, there is no carve out for students who reach the age of majority. If a student is 18, these notifications still need to occur, correct? And I did clarify with our legal team that that is correct. I had another question about emancipated students, and I do need to clarify that, but given the other legislation, I believe emancipated would probably be excluded, but I will confirm just to be sure. And the second one, the commenter said, I understand the need to follow the law, but when does the risk of the child's life come into play? What happens if you tell the parents and then the student is extremely physically or mentally injured? What if the parents find out and the child commits suicide? I think their life is more important than following an unjust law that targets children. I know that during legislation, that was a topic that the legislators addressed, and given, I believe they quoted DHS rules and some other rules, but this is a law and we need to follow the law. I don't feel like this is overextending anything in the law, but of course, this is the board to ask the questions.
I have a question. Do our teachers, if they're presented with a situation like that, where they have concern for a student, because there's a lot of things that students might confide in their teachers with, what avenues do our teachers have of ways to help kids tell their parents things that are difficult? There might be somebody who finds himself, there's lots of situations that high schoolers may need help telling their parents something that's gonna be difficult. So do teachers typically go to the counselors and counselors help guide that, or what avenues or paths do teachers have to help them navigate those tough conversations with students?
I would say counselors, I would say some of their administration. We have the student assistance program where kids can go through that. We have the new counseling program that's gonna be starting for students to access, so I would say to use those types of things. I wouldn't I mean, all these new laws are putting teachers in a very awkward position of what they can and can't say. So nobody wants to break the law, and we understand that, but those are the avenues that I would try.
I just have like a clarifying question. So if a student asks to be called by a different name or different pronouns, and the teacher can then have a conversation with that student, you know, I need to notify administration who will talk to your parents. Like, there is some forewarning, right? I mean, they're not just blindsided, and then that gives the student an opportunity to decide, do I wanna go by Billy, or do I want this to be presented to my parents, because you have to let them know legally.
That's why we went with the proactive questionnaire, so that parents could do that ahead of time, so that we're not spending 2 or 3 weeks waiting for the kid to be called by a name they don't want to be called, when the parent may very well have been fine with it. I know not all districts are doing that, and I understand that's not logical to some parents, but the advice that we've been given from our legal team is that it needs to be equitable, because you can't have one population of people that have to go through hoops to have something like that happen and then just grant it to somebody else. So that's why Michael to Mike is requiring the same thing as Michael to Michelle, so that there's equity in that process. The teachers wouldn't be the ones calling home, it would be the administration who would be calling home, so there should not be surprises, because the student would be making that request. It wouldn't be the teacher saying, I think Michael really wants to be called Michelle, and then surprise the child by that phone call. That should not happen.
If we find out that emancipated minors are excluded from this, are we going to go back in and change the wording so that it's clearer?
That's up to the board if you wanted to wait to do that, or pass this and
I mean,
we'd have
past
to
it, and
bring
maybe we come back if it would be excluded, that way it's clear, so we don't have any confusion if they are,
could.
they don't have to follow.
I would move to table this until we have clarification on that. I don't like to vote on what ifs necessarily.
Is there a second?
I'm reading through it to double check something, sorry. I may second. Because that would also give us the opportunity to clarify that it does include 18-year-olds, because I know a lot of us had the same question about that. So we
Is
could,
there a second?
yes, sorry, seconding.
You have there,
Kent,
So
we're moving.
We're moving
just
to
Motion to
table.
tabling it
Tabling
until
it.
we
To
get.
table.
Okay, yes.
Mead,
Yes.
Menke,
Yes.
Geiser,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Rootman,
Yes.
Bowser.
yes.
Unanimous.
Fine. Okay, we have a new action item, item 7. And that is explained or possible language in assembly. I would point out that this is not a performance review. This is merely okaying a directive, and not just, it's a directive from the board to the superintendent.
I support action item number 7. I think that, you know, the way that this is written is that, and did we read this out for the public?
They can see it.
Okay. This directly
He has
relates,
a question.
what's that?
I think he has a question.
Okay.
I don't have a question, I was just gonna speak to it, is that okay?
Oh.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I support this, and there are many reasons that I do support this policy. One, I wanna support our administrators and superintendent and staff. I don't wanna leave them on an island when it comes to having to make difficult decisions that are gonna draw a significant amount of public interest and possible scrutiny. Oftentimes, and particularly with Senate File 496, there are open questions around the constitutionality of that law in general and specific aspects of it. And so I feel like we are most supportive of our administrator and superintendent when we get to take the heat for making those tough decisions and not putting it on their shoulders to possibly making a decision that might be counter to their ethics, might put them in a position to put in place policies that maybe potentially draw us litigation. I feel like that needs to be on our shoulders, not the superintendent or administrators. Again, unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of laws that I believe are rooted in bias, but whether you believe that or not, I feel like it's part of our governance and responsibility to make that tough call and not put that on the shoulders of our teachers and administrators.
So Dan, do you want to make this the motion?
Yeah,
Read the statement, or
Are we done? I mean, I'd like to continue to discuss this if we could before a motion is made.
I would also, when you guys are all done, like to add.
I have two things that I have a little concern about. I have a little concern about us saying any and all proposed changes, because I do feel like we have hired an administrative team and we are responsible to Dr. Daka in her role to do the job of making decisions, and sometimes there's timely decisions that maybe wouldn't fit into the timetable of board meetings or even special board meetings, quite frankly, because there has to be 24 hours notice. So the timing of that concerns me slightly. And then the other thing that concerns me is I understand when we're talking about policy, because that directly is our responsibility, but none of us sitting at this table have any background or training in interpreting law or legislation. And so I don't know that I would like to, I agree with Dan that I would like to be a part of the conversation when it is appropriate and hear like the legal advice that you're getting, because we know you're seeking legal counsel on several of these things. And so for us to be in the loop of that, I would be supportive of, but I'm concerned with us taking on the job of interpreting the law. That makes me feel uncomfortable because I personally am not, and knowing the background of those of us sitting at the table, none of us are trained to do that. So I have a little concern about us taking on that role or feeling that we are qualified to interpret legislation.
I guess I would say the same would go for, none of us are accountants, yet we approve bills. There are all sorts of things that we're asked to approve that we don't necessarily have a formal education in. And I feel and then that's our role as an elected official to seek out that expert advice. I know that the way new policy things have been enacted has caused a level of community concern and disapproval with our district's actions that, I think 99 out of 100 laws that are passed, it's gonna be something that is that we approve fairly quickly like we do through our consent agenda and things like that. But I really feel that we can seek out that expert advice. We can request that we have counsel available, and not necessarily just from Allers, which represents 90% of school districts in our state, but from perhaps entities like the ACLU or other expert legal advice that may be contradictory to that we receive from Allers. And so I feel like there needs to be a process for us to have some approval of this.
So I hear what you're saying, the any and all gives me pause as well, just because of how timely things have to go. But I read this more as giving the direction to have her consult us, but of what the lawyers said, so that we have an understanding. That's how I read it versus trying to hold anything up necessarily. It's more just so we would have an understanding before we move forward with stuff, which I think would be helpful. That's how I read it.
There is a process that boards normally would follow. And, you know, whoever the elected officers are, typically, it's really no secret. Sometimes people like Dr. Watson would call and say, the show choir's stuck in Cedar Rapids. It's gonna be an overnight because it can't get back. So I, as a president, would approve that because obviously that was an emergency. And so there is a procedure with whomever the board chooses to elect as an officer to have that be taken care of in a timely fashion. That's probably something for people at this table to think about, because that is an empowerment that you give to those people when you elect them. So I do want to clarify that there are vehicles to handle situations like that. And of course, there's always an option to call a special meeting, and we've done that.
Well,
Go ahead.
can I just say one thing
Sure.
here quick? We also have to remember, a lot of the legislation does not take effect immediately.
Right.
We've got a couple of months' notice so that the district can digest, get all the information that they need to present to us so that we can support what they're proposing happens.
Jason, Bree?
Directionally, I like where the motion is going. I just wonder if this doesn't need to be more codified into policy. And the only reason I say that is I don't think the next legislative session is going to be any different than what we saw last year. I think we're going to continue to see more of the same. And public school districts around the state are going to be challenged with much more than we have been. And I think having a codified process of, okay, look, this is going to really change fundamentally how we deliver public education in this community. We need to get the board involved and bring them along so that they can understand how we're planning on doing this. So I think there needs to be something a little bit more codified than just a motion providing direction.
I would be supportive of a policy.
And I don't know what that looks like, but I would say we've got some time between now and January to try to figure out what something like that might look like.
In a more immediate sense, I would like to know how we're gonna further comply before journalists or the public find out. And so as we look towards further compliance with Senate File 496, I would hope that would be presented to not only this board but the public in a board meeting before moving forward. I was pretty concerned as we were notified after the book stuff, this is all public foiable stuff, but there were other compliance measures around Senate File 496 that we were made aware of that the public was not. That we were gonna remove all flags other than the United States and Iowa flag, so every national flag was gonna be moved from our buildings. That we were going to extend the don't say trans, don't say gay portions of Senate File 496 through grade 12, and in all buildings. And so I guess even though that particular component of Senate File 496 was specifically for grades K through 6. And so I agree with Jason. I'd like to see this codified if we can. I agree with doing this motion, but at the very least, I would like to impress upon our district staff and administration that any future moves towards compliance with Senate File 496 be done in a transparent way with the ability for the public to comment.
Would you like to speak?
No, actually, I'm fine.
Okay.
I know Rosalie does.
I do. So first of all, I would say that this, I'll do what the board directs because I work for the board. But I feel that this sends a message of distrust between me and my team. Allers is our board-approved attorney. That firm is our attorney. There's a number of attorneys there. Should the board decide in November when a new board comes on that that's not the firm that you want, that's the board's decision. If there's a misstep, that's who's gonna come to our defense. And if we don't listen to the people that the board has decided is going to be our attorneys, then I think we're making a mistake. I think the process for the book quarantine was an internal process that was made public needlessly. Had we been left alone to follow that process, we would have gotten where we are now, but it turned into something that it didn't need to turn into. You're talking about experts, and I believe that's why you hired me, for my instructional knowledge and my ability to do what I need to do to run the district, and I believe that I have the best expert team in the metro area. So I would just put that out there that I believe that that piece should be checked off. Just today, thinking of what is, to Jenny's point, what's gonna happen, what kinds of things if we take that motion, and I'll just quickly read through some of them. I'm gonna need some clarity because I don't know what this looks like in practice. I'm predicting going to have many board meetings similar to what happened in COVID. Legislative items that become effective upon signature goes to the timeliness of implementation. Policies we already seek board approval for. I don't know the extent of the processes that you want to have brought before you for approval. Is that professional development has to come ahead of time? I need to know what's clarified on what agency. Is it a federal agency, a state agency? Is it the BOEE? Is it any legal administrative rules that come down? And just to give you an idea of what in the last couple of weeks that you would have needed to weigh in on is how do we notify staff that if they're 18, they're mandatory reporters? How do we put Your Life Iowa on the back of ID cards? The principals have to vet all surveys and activities, reference checks to meet the guidelines, books, names, pronouns, disruptive students that we still don't have guidance from IASB or the DE on, the change in bullying and harassment, verifying 10 years of teaching, notifying new requirements for staff members with masters, active consent for My Savers and Savers, plans to address K-6 gender identity legislation, the new health curriculum, change in processes for the reconsideration committee, regulations that go with policies. Those are not something that come to the board. You get the policies. The regulations are the forms that we create to be able to follow those policies. And then we have hundreds of questions that our staff is sitting out there and not having answered because when this was recommended, I put a hold on all that. And so I, in 22 years of being a leader, have opened the school year not looking like I know what I'm doing. And I don't like that. Policy 204 outlines the executive role for the board, and that's to select the superintendent and as the district's chief officer, and basically make sure that I'm following the law and the policies that are created by the board. So again, I'll do what the board desires, but it's really gonna handicap the work that we do. And you say January is a long way away, but it's not. It's really not. And staff licenses are on the line, and I do not want a single staff member to have their license in jeopardy because we're not gonna be prepared. So I need that clarification. If this is what the board desires, I need to know how we're gonna clarify that. And I don't know if that's another meeting, if that's, I don't know what that is.
So, hold on. So I don't know where this specific wording came from, but my general take from it would be that, or at least the way that I'm interpreting it from my lens, is that the board is seeking for prior knowledge on potentially explosive topics, so that we have at least a basic understanding of where the district stands and what they're gonna move forward on, so that we're not caught off guard, because I feel like we were caught off guard pretty handily. So I don't know where this wording specifically came from, and maybe this isn't the correct wording for the directive that we're all looking for. And maybe this needs to be looked at again and maybe taken up at the next meeting. Just because I don't know if this is saying exactly what we wanted to say. And I think what we were trying to get at is that we just want more of a heads up on certain issues that might be, like, we've had our fair share of big topics over the last couple of years, and being caught off guard is not where any of us want to stand. Does that make sense? Am I reading the room properly? Okay. So maybe we just need different wording for this so that we're not handicapping ourselves, we're not, putting admin and you in a bad situation where you have like a timely stuff that needs to come up, but that we're also not putting ourselves at a disadvantage where we're caught off guard, where we're here, like where we're getting contacted about really big things that probably should have come before us. At least from, because it could have been, either way, it really could have been a legal issue, which then would have been a financial issue, which should have come before us anyway. Whichever way that decision had gone, we've had plenty of issues like that, where if we go one way, we could get sued, we go another way, we could get sued. And we have to decide which way we want to stand on that issue, so we just need to reword this, I think. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I read this as the board wants to help carry the burden.
Yeah.
We want to be able to support you and your team and understand why decisions are being made before they're sent out to the district. That's why we were elected.
I can only speak for myself when I'm saying I don't want to micromanage you or your team. I trust that you and your team are very equipped to do their job. If I have questions or concerns about things, I will address that with you. And I will ask that and have a conversation with you if I have something specific or if there was something I think, needs. We have we have the ability to get things brought up at the board table if we feel that that's necessary. So I personally don't want to send the message to you or to anyone on your team that we don't trust the job that you're doing. I think that you have all been put in a really tough position, and without, some guidance that would have helped make this transition a lot better. And so, but at the same time, yes, it is hard to be caught off guard or to not have knowledge of things. It's a little embarrassing when people from the community know things and they ask you about it and you're like, I have no idea. And, so that's a little tough. So that's where I'm at on that. So I agree with you, Ashley, that I think this wording seems a bit extreme.
So do we want to table this and try to come up with a better direction that more fits to what we are actually looking for?
I guess I would like to hear, what's our plan for further compliance with Senate File 496?
Well, I think that's where I need clarity, because 496 isn't just about books. 496 is encompassing.
It's a whole lot of stuff.
It's the handbook. How do parents check off that they have access to the handbook, that they've read the handbook? There's all the little minutia.
Let me put it under a microscope. In terms of don't say trans, don't say gay.
I don't know
K
what
through
that
6.
is.
The prohibition against promotion of sexual orientation and gender identity.
In K6.
In K6.
That hasn't, we pulled those books off the list for further discussion. That was one thing I was expecting the board to give some direction on as well, is that look like a committee of people that get together and we have some tentative definitions for what we interpret promotion to be and representation to be. So we could offer to a group of people to accept these definitions or ask the board to accept
And who's gonna be
them.
involved, you know, like for the health
That's
Dan,
the board.
we
Dan,
had a,
we have this motion,
okay.
and those are, you're getting into things that
No,
aren't
I
part of
guess,
it.
no, this is a part of it.
It is not what we need to do tonight.
Well,
And so what I heard, Ashley, was that a motion?
I was more looking for consensus versus a motion. Can we make a motion to table this and have a further discussion so that we can give a direction that
If you need to.
I move to table this and to hold a further, I don't know how to phrase it so that we make sure we talk about it at the next meeting and make sure that we discuss a direction that has better wording for what we're looking for.
can we put as part of that motion that it will be on the next board meeting's agenda?
If I may.
Yeah.
What I would do is include in the motion the specific date of the meeting that you would want to table this item.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick
Yeah, yeah,
question before
please.
that? My only concern with tabling is it handicapping you to do your job for the next 2 weeks?
That was gonna be my question after somebody seconded or didn't second it, is what do I do now? I
Right.
mean, we have a number of things. If your
Yeah.
major
Makes sense.
concern is the gender identity book piece, we aren't gonna make any decisions on how we're gonna tackle that. So what do you want me to not do between now and then? That I just
I
need
don't want
direction.
my community being erased from our schools, and that was a real fear of not only me, but parents, the speaker that was here. When we looked at compliance around Senate File 496 and what our plan was that we were informed about, like, that's literally what it looked like. And although I feel for you and I'm empathetic for your distress and those of the administrators and the teachers, there are so many children, families, and staff in this school district that were absolutely terrified that we were gonna be completely excluded from the school environment. So I understand your distress and I'm sorry that you had to experience that, but I don't feel that people are understanding the gravity that the LGBTQ community, our students and families and teachers too, were looking at. And so I want a heads up, and I'll stop there. But
And that's what I just said. If that's the piece that the board has the most concern about,
I feel I've been clear on that.
I don't know that it would be fair to speak for 7 people as far as their
I'm
priorities.
just speaking about me.
Right,
my
and
community.
so at this point, did you make a motion?
Where did this language come from? Who created this specific motion, like the recommended motion? Who did that come from?
Allers.
Allers, okay. I think we need to tackle how the district would handle stuff before I can make a motion, because if I make a motion and it hangs us up for 2 more weeks, I don't necessarily wanna do that. So I think we have to tackle that conversation first.
Clarify that.
So if I table this, Dr. Daka is worried that it could possibly hold up more topics because we haven't actually discussed what parts of this because she's already had, as she said, she has already had to put a number of different things on hold while waiting to see if we were going to motion this. I don't necessarily want to table it if those things are going to continue to have to be held back.
I don't think it would hold it up because we haven't approved anything. Like, there has been no action taken.
So, but
So it would
Dr.
be
Daka
business
said,
as usual, except that
Can we
Dr.
get-
Daka now has said that she would also give heads up.
okay, so
to
we're
the
giving that
board.
direction
I
then.
think that's what
for
I
the time
understood you
being.
say, right, Rosalie?
Is that okay?
is I'm understanding
Right.
that the piece you have the biggest concern on is the notification of the hot button topic that Dan mentioned. So if I don't,
And if we are tabling this, I think, again, going maybe back to what Jenny asked about any and all, I mean, I think then you also have to determine what are hot buttons. I mean, because what one person's hot button is something different than somebody else's, so I think that then that's a whole nother.
Would that be okay to
Agenda
have part of the conversation then when we bring this back up? So that we could make a decision, like if it would be something that could potentially land us in legal hot water. One way or the other, like, well, there's a lot of different things that have happened that are pretty clear that the
Right, that's what I'm
ACLU is
saying,
good,
how
but
do we
like,
know?
but like the ACLU could there's only certain topics that they're going to potentially.
Well, but we shouldn't just be concerned about what the
Right.
ACLU
No,
thinks.
but I'm saying,
I think
like,
if we,
we're very often not going to get sued over a handbook situation, right? Like, there's a lot of decisions that are more smaller that we know are not gonna land us in hot
Okay.
water one way or the other.
So then I'm misunderstanding because I thought that there was a pretty strong consensus that we wanted to be able to help carry some of the burden of
By
these
having
hard
those
decisions,
conversations.
not because we're gonna be sued.
Yeah, but like, that's what I'm saying, like,
I mean, I think there's,
the burden comes with that, though. I'm trying not to cut you off, I'm so sorry, I'm such a jerk. I don't feel like I'm clarifying myself, I'm sorry.
Given that-
there's a really fine line that we're walking here between saying this is what we, the board, want, so that we can support the administration, the entire district, and our community in our role. And that's, we've got to be careful not to define it too specifically and micromanage through that specificity. Yeah.
Given that there are a number of enforcement dates coming up on January 1st, would it be appropriate for the board to have a presentation sometime in late September, early October, date to be determined, to hear from our new DEI coordinator in terms of how we plan to continue to live our mission of teaching all and reaching all while complying with 496 as we understand it and interpret it? Or does that get to,
I don't think it's solely on Ms. Davis's shoulders. I think it's a collective effort.
Right,
I think
and I think it's more than that,
if you want,
piece of legislation.
okay,
if you want me to talk with my team about the pieces that we have that we would like to move forward with and bring that to present to the board, what is it, Julie, the 14th? Is that the next meeting? 11th? And then in the meantime, if there's a piece that to what Catherine said, that has to be acted on, and I can work through the officers if they feel like they can okay me to move, like the survey, we can do that. If they feel like hold, they can tell me to hold, and I can make sure that's part of that as well.
is that enough time? Is the next meeting enough time, or do we need to go a little further
A
out?
lot of it we have planned out, so I think we could. And what we can't, then I just tell you we're still working on.
So the motion that's still on the table, right? You made a motion, yes?
I don't know if I finished it.
Do
Because
you
we were
wanna
still
just table
talking.
it, or I would be fine with just moving the motion forward as written and we can vote up or down on it as a board. I would still like to get an update before policies are implemented around the more controversial aspects of Senate File 496. But I would be okay with us voting yes or no on the motion as written.
As written?
Because somebody made that motion.
I'm not sure any motion's been made fully.
There hasn't been a full
Nothing's been
motion.
seconded.
All right, I move to. I move the following motion, that the superintendent be directed to present any and all proposed changes in district policy, practice, or procedures responding to any new legislation / administrative rules or agency guidance to the board of directors for consideration and approval prior to implementation of any changes.
Thank you, we'll second.
Okay.
Can I request a roll call vote?
I'm just finding my place. I believe it's Mead.
No, not as written.
Mankey?
No.
Sarah Geiser?
No.
Anderson?
No.
Gutman?
Yes.
Hauser?
No.
Kent?
No.
Motion does not carry. 1-6.
I will move to adjourn.
That
One
was
second.
Kent?
So you guys will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.